Calvin drove the route that night, and the night after. On the third night, he pulled into a truck stop outside Paducah and sat in a booth with coffee and thought about what he'd seen, what he'd been told, and the distance between those two things. Then he looked up the name of the journalist who had written about Shayla. Have you ever seen something that didn't fit, and talked yourself out of it, and spent years wondering what would have happened if you hadn't? Welcome to Strong Mind Stories, character-driven stories with a twist you won't see coming, and an emotional truth you probably will. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want more. Let's get into it. Calvin had been driving trucks for 29 years. He had started at 28 because the money was real, and the silence suited him, and the road asked nothing of him except to pay attention, which he was good at. He had a gift for it, the kind of low-grade constant alertness that some people found exhausting, and Calvin found restful. He noticed things. A deer on a shoulder 200 yards out. A black ice patch by the way the headlights caught the road surface differently. A car sitting too long at a rest stop. His ex-wife Loretta had called it his only real talent, and she had not meant it as a compliment. Calvin had taken it as one anyway. They'd been married for 19 years. The road had been a problem from the start, not dramatically, not with fights and ultimatums, just a slow erosion that neither of them had the energy to stop. He was gone 4 nights out of 7. She worked at a billing office in Memphis. Somewhere in the middle years, she had started spending time with a man from her office named Gary, and when Calvin found out, he recognized that he had no real standing to be as hurt as he was, because he had been absent for most of a marriage, and Gary had simply been present. He and Loretta had signed the papers on a Tuesday morning, and Calvin had been on the road by 4 that afternoon. That was 6 years ago. They spoke rarely, holidays sometimes, her birthday if he remembered. Loretta's niece, a girl named Shayla, 17 years old, had gone missing from a gas station outside Ames, Kentucky 9 years ago. Calvin had been questioned briefly because he ran that route, and his logbook put him within 40 miles of the area that night. He was cleared within a day. The case stayed open for 2 years, and then went quiet. No body, no suspect, no explanation. Loretta had never fully recovered. Calvin was not sure her sister had either. He had thought about Shayla on that road 1,000 times since. The way you thought about something that happened near you but not to you, with a specific kind of guilt that had no real target. Her name was Deb Rourke. She had written 3 pieces about Shayla's disappearance for the Paducah paper. 1 at the time, 1 at the 1-year mark, 1 at the 5-year mark. Calvin had read all 3. One line had stayed with him: some cases go cold because the trail runs out. This one feels like the trail was swept. He found her through the paper's website and sent a short email from his phone. I drive the Memphis-Paducah route, and I saw something at the Bellard property 3 nights ago that I think you should know about. She called within 2 hours. Tell me exactly what you saw, she said. No preamble, no pleasantries. Calvin respected that. He told her. The vehicles, the running engines, the man in uniform, the time, the call to the non-emergency line, the follow-up and what he'd been told. Deb was quiet for a moment. Then, you said one of the men was in uniform. What department? I couldn't read the shoulder patch at that speed, but the shirt was tan. Could have been county. The Bellard property. Who owns it? I don't know. I've never seen anyone there at night. I'll find out, she said. Calvin, don't call the department again. Don't mention this to anyone local. Can you drive past that property again tonight? It's on my route. I need to know if the vehicles are back. I'll look, he said. Don't slow down. Don't stop. Just look. He drove past at 3:17 that morning. The yard was dark. The vehicles were gone. He texted Deb from the next rest stop. She texted back, property registered to a man named Roy Cutter. Look him up. Calvin looked him up on his phone. Roy Cutter was 61, address listed in Ames, Kentucky. There was an old Facebook profile with no recent activity. A few tagged photos, hunting, a county fair, men Calvin didn't recognize. Then a photo that stopped him. It was from 11 years ago. A group of men at what looked like a summer cookout. Roy Cutter was in the center. Standing 2 men to his left, younger then, heavier now, was a man in a tan county sheriff's uniform. The caption read, Roy and the boys, 4th of July. Calvin stared at the photo for a long time. Then he texted Deb a screenshot and drove the rest of his route in silence. They met 2 days later at a diner in Paducah, a corner booth. Mid-morning when the place was mostly empty. Deb Rourke was in her mid-40s, short hair, A reporter's notebook she kept closed on the table in front of her, like she was reminding herself not to reach for it too soon. She had been circling this for 3 years. Calvin was the piece she had been missing. Roy Cutter had a daughter named Brianna, she said. She'd be 26 now. She ran away from home at 15, came back, ran again at 16. Child Services had 3 reports on the household between 2005 and 2009. Nothing ever substantiated. She looked at Calvin. The household Roy Cutter ran was not a good one, the kind of not good that tends to stay off the official record because the right people look the other way. What was happening behind those walls involved the coercion and trafficking of young girls, minors, most of them, and it had been going on for years under the protection of at least one person with a badge. What does that have to do with Shayla? Calvin said. Shayla disappeared from a gas station 4 miles from the Cutter property. Deb paused. I always thought the geography was strange. That gas station isn't on the way to anything from where Shayla lived. The working theory was she was grabbed randomly. She opened her notebook. But she wasn't there randomly. She was meeting someone. Calvin thought about that. Meeting who? Deb turned the notebook so he could see it. A printout of a photograph. Grainy, clearly taken at a distance with a long lens. A farmer's market, vendors and shoppers. A woman at a vegetable stand. She was looking over her shoulder at something outside the frame. The look on her face was not casual. It was the look of someone checking. I took that 3 months ago, Deb said. In Nashville. I've been trying to find a name for her ever since. Calvin looked at the photograph. The woman was in her mid to late 20s. Dark hair, slight build. You think that's Shayla, he said. I think it could be. Deb tapped the photo. She's looking over her shoulder at a man who was standing near the entrance. By the time I got across the market, he was gone. She was gone. I've been back 4 times. She paused. Calvin, if Shayla is alive, if she got out and built herself a life somewhere, then the people at that property aren't hiding what they did to her. Calvin understood it a half-second before she said it. They're looking for her, he said. They have been for 9 years, Deb said. And the man in the tan uniform, who was at that property at 3 a.m, is Deputy Alan Greer, who has been with the county sheriff's department for 14 years and who grew up 3 miles from Roy Cutter. Calvin sat with that. When I called the non-emergency line, he said slowly. The call went into the department log, Deb said, which Greer would have access to, which means he now knows someone on the Memphis-Paducah route noticed something. He knows it was a truck driver, Calvin said. He knows the general time window and the direction of travel. She looked at him steadily. How many trucks run that stretch between 2 and 4 a.m? 3 or 4 regulars, maybe a few others depending on the week. He could narrow it down given enough time, Deb said. They looked at each other across the table. How close are you to finding her, Calvin said. Closer than I was a week ago. Deb closed the notebook. The woman in that photo bought a jar of honey from the vendor. I tracked him down. He remembered her. Said she came a few times last spring and then stopped. He thought her name might have started with a K. She paused. That's what I have. It's not enough to find her before Greer does. No, Deb said, it's not. Calvin looked out the window at the parking lot. His truck sat at the far end, a wall of white and chrome in the late morning light. He had driven 412 times past that property and said nothing and done nothing. And the one time he had said something, he had put a woman in danger without knowing he was doing it. He thought about Loretta. He thought about how she had never used the word dead when she talked about Shayla, even years later. How she always said missing. He had assumed that was grief, the way people refused certain words. Now he wondered if it was something else entirely. He took out his phone. Loretta picked up on the 4th ring. She sounded like she had been expecting the call and not in a good way. I heard you were asking questions, she said. From who? Her mother. Your name got back to her somehow. I didn't contact her mother, Calvin said. No, but you contacted someone and word travels. Her voice was tight. Calvin, what are you doing? I saw something on my route. I'm sitting with a journalist, right now, who thinks Shayla might be alive. Silence. Loretta. I know, she said, very quiet. You know what? A long pause. The kind that had something behind it. She called me, Loretta said. 2 years after she disappeared, from a number I didn't recognize. She said she was safe. She said she couldn't tell me where she was or what name she was using. She said, please don't look for me. She said if I loved her, I'd let people keep thinking what they were thinking. Her voice had gone flat in the way voices went flat when someone had been carrying a thing alone for a long time. She said there were people who would find her if anyone started looking. Calvin closed his eyes. You never told anyone, he said. She asked me not to, not even her mother, especially not her mother. A pause. Shayla knew Renee. Knew she would go straight to the police, straight to the news, do everything she had been told not to do. She needed someone who could be trusted to stay quiet. She called me because she knew I would hold it. I don't know if that says something good about me or something sad. It says something true about you, Calvin said. I thought about it for years, whether I was doing the right thing, whether she was really safe, or whether someone was making her say it. Her voice dropped, but she knew things on that call, things only she would know. It was her. Calvin looked at Deb Rourke across the table. Deb had gone very still. Loretta, he said, I need to know if you have any way to reach her. Why? Because the man who has been looking for her for 9 years may have gotten closer in the last week, because of me. He said it plainly. It needed to be said plainly. I didn't know. I thought I was doing the right thing. I may have accelerated something, and I need to warn her. Another silence, longer this time. I have an email address, Loretta said. She gave it to me on that call, said it was for emergencies only, said if I ever used it she'd know something had gone wrong. A breath. I've never used it. This is the emergency, Calvin said. He heard her breathing on the other end of the line. He thought about 19 years and how most of them had been conducted from a cab going 60 miles per hour through the dark, and how he had told himself he was present for the marriage, when what he had really been was physically nearby when he happened to pass through. Okay, Loretta said. Okay, I'll send it. Tell me what to say. Deb drafted the message and Loretta sent it from her own email address so Shayla would recognize it. They kept it short. They said only what she needed to know, that people were active on the property, that a deputy named Greer was involved, that she needed to move if she hadn't already. They did not ask where she was. They did not ask her to respond. Then Calvin did the one thing he could still do. He got in his truck and drove to Ames. He parked on the road a quarter mile past the Bellard property, killed his headlights and sat. If Greer came back before the state police moved, Calvin intended to be a witness. He had his phone, Deb's number ready, and 29 years of logging things that other people missed. It was not much. It was what he had. He sat there for 2 hours. Nothing moved at the property. No vehicles, no lights. Just the single security light on the barn corner throwing its pale circle on the dead grass. His phone buzzed. A text from Loretta. 4 words. She got it. She moved. Calvin sat with that for a long moment. Then he texted Loretta back, thank you. Then he called Deb. She moved, he said. Good, Deb said. Because I didn't file this cold. The state police have had pieces of this for months. They've been waiting on a trigger. Greer won't be on the road by morning. Calvin drove back through Ames slowly, the town dark and still, and pulled into the gas station on the edge of town. The same one. The one that had been the last place anyone saw Shayla, and sat with the engine running. Then he picked up his phone and called Loretta. She answered on the second ring. I got your text, he said. I know, she said, a pause. I just keep reading it. The line was quiet, not uncomfortable, just the particular quiet of 2 people who had been a long time out of the habit of talking, and were finding that the habit was not entirely gone. You did the right thing, he said, carrying it all those years. I used to wonder about that in the middle of the night. She trusted you with the hardest thing she had, Calvin said. You held it. Loretta was quiet for a moment. You called me, she said. That's what made the difference. If you hadn't called me, I should have called more, he said, a long time ago. She didn't answer right away. He didn't expect her to. Some things you said and then let sit, because they were true and too late, and both of those things mattered. Drive safe, she said finally. I will, he said. To understand why Shayla ran, you had to understand Brianna Cutter. Shayla had met her at school. Quiet girl, kept to herself, wore long sleeves in warm weather. Shayla had a way of noticing things that other people let slide. They had become careful, private friends, the kind who met at the gas station on the edge of town because Brianna was not supposed to have friends her father didn't know about. Over months of careful conversation, Brianna had told her things, more than enough. Shayla understood by the end of that winter exactly what happened at the Cutter property. Young girls coerced, moved, disappeared into a network that Roy Cutter had been running for years. She understood who protected it and what it meant that a deputy's name kept coming up as the person her father called when there was a problem that needed handling. The night Shayla disappeared, she had gone to that gas station to meet Brianna. who had called her crying and said she needed to talk. Brianna never came. Instead, a car pulled up that Shayla recognized, Roy Cutter's truck, and two men got out who were not Roy Cutter. Brianna had told her enough. She didn't need more information than that. She ran. She left her phone on the ground next to the air pump because she understood, at 17, that phones could be tracked. She walked 4 miles to the highway and stood on the shoulder in the dark until a woman in a minivan stopped and asked if she needed help. She said yes. She said she needed to get very far away from this county very fast. The woman drove her to Nashville. Shayla spent 3 days in a shelter, thinking. She knew what she had seen. She knew who the deputy was. She knew that going to local police meant going to people who already knew and had decided not to act. She knew that going to her mother meant her mother would go to the news and the police and everyone, and that the people she was running from would know exactly where to look. She was 17 years old, and she thought it through, with the clarity that came from having no good options and needing to choose the least bad one. She chose to disappear. She found work in Nashville, then Knoxville, then a small town in Tennessee where no one knew her name. She built a life the way you built one when you started with nothing. Carefully, slowly, one true thing at a time. She went to farmers' markets on Saturday mornings because they were open and crowded and anonymous, and she needed those things. She kept moving when anything felt wrong. She put 9 years between herself and that gas station on the edge of Ames. She never forgot Brianna. Deb Rourke found Brianna 6 weeks into the investigation, living in Cincinnati under a different name, working at a hospital laundry. She had gotten out at 18, the same way Shayla had. She had spent 9 years not talking about any of it. When Deb called her, she cried for a long time before she said anything. Then she said everything. Every detail came out. The Cutter household, the network Roy Cutter had built, the way young girls had been coerced and trafficked across county lines, and the way Deputy Alan Greer had shielded the operation for years, burying complaints, redirecting investigations, making sure the right calls went nowhere. Her testimony, combined with Calvin's account, and the records recovered from the Bellard property, gave the state police what they needed to move. Deputy Alan Greer was arrested the morning after the evidence package was filed, charged with obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and trafficking in persons. Roy Cutter was taken into custody at his home in Ames before 7 that same morning on the same charges. 3 other men identified from vehicles at the property were charged separately in the weeks that followed. Deb Rourke published the story 4 days later, 11,000 words. 3 years of work and 1 truck driver's phone call. It began with a 17-year-old girl who understood exactly what she was running from and ran anyway. It was a Saturday morning in January, thin winter light, the town quiet. Calvin was parked at the gas station on the edge of Ames, the same one, with the coffee going cold in the cup holder. Deb Rourke sat in the passenger seat with her notebook closed on her lap. They had not discussed why they were both here. They had just both shown up. Loretta's car was already in the lot. She was standing outside it with her sister Renee, Shayla's mother, who had not slept the night before. Calvin could see that from 50 feet away. Renee was holding herself the way people held themselves when they were trying not to come apart before the moment arrived. A gray sedan pulled in from the highway. It sat for a moment with the engine running. Then the door opened and a woman got out. She was 26 years old, dark hair, slight build, the careful way of moving that people developed when they had spent years making sure they didn't take up too much space. She stood next to the car and looked across the lot at her mother. Renee made a sound that Calvin felt in his chest. She crossed the lot at something between a walk and a run, and she reached her daughter and held on with both arms, and Shayla, who had been composed for 9 years out of necessity, who had held herself together through things that most people would not survive, put her face against her mother's shoulder and stopped holding herself together. Loretta stood a few feet back, her hand over her mouth. After a while, Shayla raised her head and looked across her mother's shoulder and found Loretta. She held out one hand. Loretta crossed the distance between them and took it, and the 3 of them stood in the cold parking lot in the thin January light, holding on. Deb Rourke had opened her notebook. Then she closed it. Some things you didn't write down while they were happening. Some things you just let be what they were. Calvin picked up his cold coffee and drank it. He looked out at the highway running east and west from where they were sitting, straight and flat, disappearing in both directions. Across the lot, Shayla was laughing now. Something her mother had said, something that broke through everything and came out as real laughter. the surprised kind, from somewhere she had forgotten she had access to. It carried across the cold air and through the glass. Calvin started the truck. Thanks for listening. If you want more stories like this, subscribe.